This is my literary journey across 19 eras. Hello, welcome to my channel. Another bibliophile reads. My name is Greg, and late in 2024, I decided to do a challenge. I challenged myself to read a book published in every decade from the 1850s through the 2020s. I did this as a challenge to myself because I wanted to make sure that I was reading across time, not focusing too much on just contemporary authors. A lot of booktubers love currently published books, and I don't like currently published books as much as I like the older works of literature and nonfiction. So I decided, why not read across the 19 eras beginning in the 1850s? That would give me a wide range of diversity. There are some authors here of different races, different genders, different sexual preferences. So it covers a lot of different diversity and a lot of time. I think I appreciate the time more than anything else because people who wrote in the 1850s are not at all like the people who are writing in the 2020s. The mindset is completely different. And I like exploring those different mindsets. So what I'm going to do now is give you a list of all the 19 books that I have read across these 19 eras. I will list them chronologically in book publication order. I read print books. I read digital books. I listened to audiobooks, all sorts of formats. So let's begin my literary journey. Hard Times by Charles Dickens, published in 1854. Dickens' starkest social novel exposes the dehumanizing effects of industrial capitalism in the grim factory town of Coketown through the intersecting lives of workers, educators, and industrialists. Hard Times critiques the utilitarian thinking while offering a tightly plotted drama of moral awakening and compassion. This is the second time I listened to this audiobook. I first listened to it in the 1990s, maybe the 20-aughts. It is not my favorite Dickens. That would probably go to Bleak House, but I did enjoy listening to this audiobook. Notes from Underground by Fyodor Dostoevsky, originally published 1864, and it was translated from the Russian. A bitter, unnamed narrator delivers a fierce, self-lacerating monologue that dismantles rationalism and exposes the contradictions of the human psyche. Often seen as a precursor to existentialism, this short novel blends dark humor, philosophical inquiry, and psychological depth. I have probably read this novella 3 or 4 times in my life over a number of different translations. I first encountered it at the University of Maryland when I was taking a survey course of Russian literature in translation. It is a dark and morose story, but deeply intellectual too. Around the World in 80 Days by Jules Verne, published in 1872 and translated from the French. Part adventure romp, part ode to modernity, Verne's classic follows the unflappable Phileas Fogg as he races across the globe to win an improbable wager, a tightly paced tale filled with exotic locations, cosmic mishaps, and the thrill of early technological progress. This is the first time that I've ever read Around the World in 80 Days. It was a lot of fun, very entertaining, not a lot of intellectual depth though. The Brothers Karamazov by Fyodor Dostoevsky, originally published in 1880 and translated from the Russian. Dostoevsky's final masterpiece weaves a murder mystery with the profound explorations of faith, morality, free will, and family conflict. The volatile Karamazov brothers, intellectual, sensual, and spiritual, embody the novel's grand clash of ideas that still resonate today. This is an absolutely fantastic novel. I did a group read on Discord earlier in this year, and there were some lively discussions. Even though this is hailed as Dostoevsky's masterpiece, I actually prefer Crime and Punishment. The Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde, published in 1890. Wilde's decadent fable tells of a beautiful young man who remains outwardly perfect while his portrait absorbs the consequences of his sins, a tale of vanity, corruption, and the price of asceticism. It remains one of English literature's most haunting moral parables. This is the second time that I have listened to this audiobook, and it is quite a tale. I recently learned that the novel, as originally published by Oscar Wilde, was heavily edited. Well, maybe not heavily. It was edited for homosexual references. It was abundantly clear, apparently, in the original edition, that Dorian Gray was a homosexual. It's still kind of obvious from the edited version that Dorian Gray was a homosexual, but I guess it was a lot more obvious. I'm sort of sad that I did not read the unexpurgated version. The Man Who Was Thursday, A Nightmare by G.K. Chesterton, originally published in 1908. A surreal metaphysical thriller in which a poet turned detective infiltrates a council of anarchists, only to find reality unraveling around him. Chesterton blends espionage, absurdity, and theology into a strange, dreamlike meditation on the identity of evil. This was a fun, amazing little read. It was a reread from me. I think I read a version in the aughts. And this is an exploration of what it means, or what reality means. I recently read a biography of the spy, Robert Hansen, and this was his favorite book because it says you can't know what reality really is after reading this novel. Swann's Way by Marcel Proust, originally published in 1913 and translated from the French. The opening volume of In Search of Lost Time explores memory, desire, and perception through the narrator's childhood and Charles Swann's obsessive love affair. Proust's lush, introspective prose creates an immense world where time expands and consciousness becomes art. I picked this up and read this in January, anticipating that I would read the whole of In Search of Lost Time in 2025. I did not read all of In Search of Lost Time. I petered out in the second volume, which is a shame because I was the creator and host of this reading event. Someday, I really do need to read the whole of In Search of Lost Time. I just don't know when that will be. The Seven Madmen by Roberto Arlt, originally published 1929 and translated from the Spanish. This feverish, chaotic Argentine novel follows a desperate man drawn into a violent conspiracy led by a charismatic madman. Blending satire, paranoia, and grotesque humor, Arlt captures the social and political anxieties of a society on the brink. This is one of those novels that just sort of warps your mind. It was quite interesting, and I did find a sequel of sorts to this novel by the same author. Un Semaine de Bonté by Max Ernst, published in 1934 in France. A wordless surrealist novel composed entirely of collages. Ernst's work rearranges Victorian engravings into bizarre, dreamlike tableau. The result is a darkly humorous, unsettling journey through 7 symbolic days of violence, myth, and metamorphosis. I guess this is an early version of a graphic novel. There is no dialogue. The 7 days are preceded by some headlines in French, and you do get an English translation below the headlines. It is a weird head trip of a book. The Widow by Georges Simenon, published in 1942 and translated from the French. A quiet psychological thriller about 2 lonely people brought together by necessity and suspicion. Simenon builds tension through atmosphere and character rather than plot, crafting a haunting study of guilt, desire, and the ambiguous morality of survival. It was pointed out in the introduction of my paperback edition that this book has a bit in common with Albert Camus' The Stranger. Both were novels written in French about a murder, and both were written during World War II. The Galton Case by Ross Macdonald, published in 1959. Private detective Lou Archer investigates a wealthy family's long-buried secrets in one of Macdonald's most elegant mysteries. Blending hard-boiled style with psychological insight, the novel traces how old sins reverberate across generations. I really enjoy reading the Lou Archer series. I believe this is the 5th or 6th book in that series that I've read, and there are quite a number of books to go. I really need to read more. The Passion According to G.H. by Clarice Lispector, published in 1964 and translated from the Portuguese. A wealthy woman's encounter with a cockroach in a maid's room triggers a harrowing spiritual and existential crisis. Lispector's metaphysical novel is a hypnotic descent into consciousness, written in intense interior prose that borders on mystical revelation. This novel supposedly contains one of the most disturbing scenes in Portuguese literature. I will not tell you what it is, but it is rather disturbing and shocking. And yes, it does get those brain juices flowing. Royal Flash by George MacDonald Fraser, published in 1970. The second Flashman novel throws the cowardly, rakish anti-hero into a wild pastiche of The Prisoner of Zenda, with sharp satire, historical detail, and non-stop adventure. Fraser delivers another uproarious chapter in his rogue's dubious memoirs. I first read this novel in the 90s. I loved it. At that time, I had not read the Anthony Hope's The Prisoner of Zenda. Since then, I did read Hope's novel, and yes, Fraser rips off a lot of The Prisoner of Zenda, but it's more of an honor. He's paying homage to The Prisoner of Zenda, and you get to see Flashman again. Harry Flashman, that notorious rogue, who is so bad and he's so lovable that you have to like his books. Beloved by Toni Morrison, published in 1987. Morrison's Pulitzer Prize-winning novel confronts the legacy of slavery through the story of Setha, a mother haunted by a traumatic past and a mysterious young woman who arrives at her door. Lyrical, painful, and profound, it's a landmark work of American literature. Some people call this a horror novel because it features a ghost, or may feature a ghost. It's not really a horror novel, but there are scenes, graphic scenes of extreme horror in this novel. The horror is how badly slaves were treated. This is a book every American should read. It should be taught in high schools. It should be taught at universities. In my state of Virginia, the current governor, Glenn Youngkin, made sure that students in high school could opt out of reading this book. Shame on you, Glenn Youngkin. Everyone should be reading Beloved by Toni Morrison. Last Words from Montmartre by Miaojin, originally published in 1995 and translated from the Chinese. Written as a series of fragmentary letters, this posthumously published novel channels intense grief, desire, and identity in the 1990s Paris. Kuai's raw, intimate voice makes the book a foundational work of modern queer literature. When I was reading this book, I saw pieces of brilliance, but I was annoyed by the narrator's sort of pathetic whining about how much she loved her girlfriend. I guess it was true. She committed suicide, the author, unfortunately, but I could have dealt with a little less whining, in my humble opinion. Elena Knows by Claudio Pinheiro, originally published in 2007. translated from the Spanish. After her daughter's suspicious death, an ill woman sets out across Buenos Aires to find answers despite her worsening Parkinson's symptoms. Pinheiro blends mystery and social critique into a deeply empathetic portrait of motherhood and autonomy. I think this is going to be my favorite read of 2025. It is a magnificent novel, and it was my first time reading a book by Pinheiro, but it will not be my last. Mortality by Christopher Hitchens, originally published in 2012, a collection of essays written during Hitchens' final months, reflecting on illness, death, and the persistence of reason. With clarity, wit, and an unflinching honesty, Hitchens offers one last meditation on what it means to face the end without illusions. Hitchens was one hell of a writer. He was an atheist, an unflinching atheist, and went to his death without once denying there was no God. I really enjoy this collection of essays. It was a reread for me. I originally read it in 2012. The Lonesome Crown by Brian Lee Durfee, originally published in 2022. The concluding volume to the Five Warrior Angels trilogy delivers sweeping epic fantasy filled with political intrigue, divine prophecy, and brutal warfare. Durfee ties together sprawling storylines with high drama, vivid world building, and operatic stakes. I don't normally read epic fantasy, but this is one of those rare cases when I dived into the genre. I read the first book in the trilogy around 2022 that was called The Forgetting Moon. I listened to it on audiobook, as I did the second in the series and this last book, The Lonesome Crown. I'm glad I listened to this epic fantasy series. I'm not sure where Durfee stands with the regular epic fantasy reading crowd, but as a person who rarely reads the genre, I enjoyed it. Okay, that was my literary journey through 19 eras of writing. I really enjoyed this project. So much so that I'm going to do it again in 2026. But I'm going to challenge myself just a little more. Instead of starting with the 1850s, I'm going to start with the 1800s. But I'm going to allow myself short stories and novellas to count. I will even count poems, just to make sure that I can get even more eras done in 2026. Were any of these books that I read intriguing to you? If so, leave a comment on this video. Thank you for watching, and keep on reading.